In the opulent marble mansion, where every corner whispered of wealth, the elderly, ailing matriarch relied on a breathing apparatus. But in a shocking act of cruelty, her daughter-in-law, the Sheikh's wife, coldly reached out and unplugged the oxygen to charge her mobile phone. The old woman's life now hung by a thread, while the villainess chuckled at her own audacity. What would happen when the absent sheikh discovered this icy betrayal? The old woman's breath became an almost inaudible whisper, a faint melody lost in the opulent silence of the mansion. The daughter-in-law, oblivious to the life ebbing away just feet from her, smiled at her mobile phone screen, now fully charged. The gentle breeze entering through the open windows carried the scent of jasmine from the garden, but it could not dispel the heavy air that hung over the matriarch's room. For the daughter-in-law, the sheikh's absence meant freedom, and her mother-in-law's quietude was merely a bonus in her routine of luxury and frivolities. She descended to the vast living room, where the polished marble reflected the sunlight like a mirror, and indulged in an afternoon of online shopping, completely absorbed in her world of superficial desires. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, a strange, persistent feeling pricked the sheikh. An important meeting had just concluded, but his mind couldn't focus on the next steps. A deep unease, an icy premonition invaded him. He tried to ignore it, attributing it to travel fatigue and business complexities, but the feeling intensified, an insistent drumming in his consciousness. Suddenly, the image of his mother, frail and dependent, surged into his mind with disturbing clarity. Without hesitation, he dismissed his entourage and ordered his private jet prepared for an immediate return. The passport, which he thought he had forgotten, was merely an excuse. Something deeper pulled him back home. The aircraft sliced through the blue skies with impressive speed, and within hours, the sheikh was back in his domain. The armored car glided silently up the long stone driveway, and as he stepped out, an unusual silence greeted him. There was no usual hum of servants, nor the distant sound of music his wife enjoyed playing. The mansion seemed to breathe at a different pace, a rhythm of oppressive stillness. A shiver ran down his spine. His footsteps echoed in the vast entrance hall, a solitary sound that broke the strange calm. Driven by an urgency he couldn't explain, the sheikh ascended the marble staircases, his eyes sweeping the corridors for any sign of life. Each closed door seemed to guard a dark secret. He headed towards the wing where his mother resided, and with each step, the premonition transformed into a growing dread. As he approached the matriarch's room, a faint scent of disinfectant mingled with an almost imperceptible odor of stagnation. He pushed the door, which creaked softly. The scene that unfolded before his eyes froze the sheikh's blood. His mother lay on the bed, her face pale and lips purplish, her breathing so shallow it barely stirred her chest. Her eyes, once full of life, were half closed, and an oxygen tube lay loose beside her head. The life support machine, which should have been softly humming, was inert, its cable disconnected. In its place, a mobile phone charger was plugged into the outlet, and his wife's phone rested on the bedside table, its screen glowing with a battery-full notification. A roar erupted from the sheikh's throat, a primal sound that made the mansion walls vibrate. His dark eyes became icy slits, and fury exploded in his chest like a dormant volcano. The betrayal was palpable, the contempt for his mother's life, an insult that burned his soul. He rushed to the bed, his hands trembling as he reconnected the oxygen machine, his fingers nimble to switch it on, hoping to hear the familiar sound of air flowing. A faint sigh escaped his mother's lips as the oxygen began to fill her lungs. The sheikh then turned, his eyes sweeping the room with lethal intensity. He needed no words to understand the extent of the cruelty. His wife's mobile phone, silent and irrefutable proof, sealed her fate. A sharp cry of astonishment echoed down the corridor as the daughter-in-law, drawn by the commotion, appeared at the doorway. Her eyes widened at the sight of the sheik, and then at the scene in the room. The smile on her face dissolved into paralyzing dread. She tried to stammer something, but the words died in her throat. The sheik gave her no chance. His gaze was a death sentence, sharper than any blade. "Get out!" he growled, his voice low and controlled, yet laden with a fury that promised annihilation. "Out of my house! Out of my life! Now!" The ex-wife, her face contorted into a mask of terror, tried to find some clemency in the sheik's relentless gaze, but there was none. "No, you can't do this! I am your wife!" she shrieked, her words echoing shrilly down the corridor. But the sheik's voice was a silent thunder, and his order non-negotiable. Two guards, who had quickly arrived upon hearing the commotion, approached her. Their expressions were neutral, but their movements firm. She tried to resist, her eyes flashing with a mixture of rage and desperation. "Remove her!" the sheik's voice resonated, cold as the desert at night. The guards seized her by the arms and, despite her protests and struggles, began to drag her out. She struggled, her designer shoes scraping the polished marble, her cries of indignation and plea mingling. "My things, my belongings, I have rights." The only response was the sheik's icy silence. He didn't even look at her. His eyes were fixed on his mother's frail figure. Within minutes, the woman who had reigned over that mansion with cruelty and ostentation was pushed out of the gates, penniless, carless, with nothing but the clothes on her back and public humiliation. The wrought-iron gate clanged shut with a heavy thud, sealing her fate outside that world of luxury. Inside the mansion, the sheik wasted no second. He was already by his mother's bedside, phone to his ear, his voice, though still laden with fury, now infused with desperate urgency. "A full medical team, now, to the mansion. My mother is in critical condition." Within minutes, the silence of the house was broken by the sound of rapidly approaching sirens. A team of doctors and nurses, equipped with the most advanced medical technology, flooded the room. The sheik stepped back slightly, watching with palpable anxiety as they worked. The monitors began to beep, indicating the matriarch's vital signs. A chief doctor, with a grave expression, explained the situation. "She is very weak, Sheikh. The oxygen deprivation was severe. We need to stabilize her and monitor her closely." The Sheikh nodded, his jaw tense. A wave of guilt washed over him. He should have noticed. He should have been there. The image of his wife's mobile phone charging while his mother suffocated replayed in his mind, a vivid nightmare. His heart tightened with the pain of betrayal and the fear of losing the only family he had left. As the doctors worked, the sheik withdrew to the corridor, his thoughts a whirlwind. The daughter-in-law's expulsion was just the beginning. That woman would not only be stripped of her privileges, but of her very identity. He would remember every detail, every act of silent cruelty his mother had endured. His contacts, his fortune, his power would be used to ensure she could never harm anyone again, nor enjoy any comfort. There would be no mercy. His fury, once explosive, now solidified into a cold, calculating determination. He would make an example of her, a warning to anyone who dared disrespect his family or his authority. The mansion, once a stage for cruelty, was now a sanctuary of recovery and vigilance. The sheikh remained in the corridor, his mother's room door ajar. The soft sound of medical monitors, a constant reminder of life's fragility and betrayal's brutality. Justice, for him, was not just a concept. It was a relentless force he was ready to unleash. Night fell over the city, but for the sheikh, the darkness was just beginning. He prepared for a battle that would not be fought with swords, but with the overwhelming weight of his power and the coldness of his vengeance. The night silence, once oppressive, was now punctuated by the soft, steady rhythm of medical monitors. The sheikh remained in the corridor, his mother's room door ajar, a silent sentinel of vigil. The scent of disinfectant mingled with the fresh aroma of lavender, an effort by the servants to purify the environment after the chaos. He listened to the low murmur of the medical team, their professional and calm voices a welcome contrast to the storm that had swept through the mansion. The chief doctor emerged from the room, his expression still grave, but with a trace of relief in his tired eyes. "She is stabilized, Sheikh. Her vital signs are stronger, but the path to recovery will be long and require constant attention. The oxygen deprivation was severe and caused considerable stress to her system." The sheikh felt a knot of fear loosen slightly in his chest, but guilt and anger deepened, transforming into a cold determination. He nodded, his jaw tense. "I want a permanent medical team here. The best specialists, the most advanced equipment. My mother will lack nothing ever again." The sheikh's voice was low, but laden with unquestionable authority. He entered the room, the soft sound of the machines filling the air. His mother lay on the bed, her face still pale, but her breathing, though weak, was regular. He sat beside her, holding her thin, wrinkled hand. Her skin was cool, but a faint pulse could be felt. He caressed the back of her hand, his eyes fixed on her sleeping face. "I am here, mother," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Never again will you be alone. Never again." As his mother rested under the attentive watch of the professionals, the sheikh's mind, though relieved by her stabilization, quickly turned to the woman who had caused so much suffering. The fury he felt was no longer explosive, but a controlled flame, a cold and relentless fire burning within him. The expulsion was just the first step. The ex-wife, now stripped of her name, title, and privileges, stumbled through the city streets. The luxurious silk dress she wore, once a symbol of her status, now seemed a cruel disguise amidst the dust and anonymity of the night. The wrought iron gate had closed not only on the mansion, but on her entire former life. Her screams and pleas had dissipated into the night air, ignored by the city's indifference. She had nowhere to go, no money, no contacts who dared defy the sheikh's wrath. Dread mingled with rage, a toxic mixture that consumed her. She tried to call friends, family, but their phones went unanswered or worse, were switched off. The sheikh had already begun his work. Back at the mansion, the sheikh made a series of calls, his voice calm, but each word carrying the weight of a sentence. Bank accounts were frozen within minutes, credit cards cancelled. Properties she thought she owned were reverted to the family's name or to charity foundations. Her reputation, once built on the sheikh's splendor, crumbled under the weight of the truth he was silently spreading through his vast contacts. He ensured that no door would open for her, no hand would reach out in help. She would be an outcast, a living example of what happened to those who defied his power. The night dragged on for the ex-wife, an eternity of humiliation and despair. She tried to beg for shelter at hotels, but her name, once a free pass, was now synonymous with scandal, and her attempts to use credit cards were met with transaction-denied messages. The brutal reality of her new existence hit her with the force of a punch. Hunger and cold began to bite at her, and despair deepened with each refusal, each closed door. The luxury she so valued was now a distant memory, mocking her in her helplessness. The sheikh watched dawn break from his mother's room window. The sun rose, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, but the darkness in his soul remained. Vengeance was underway, but it brought none of the satisfaction he had imagined. The pain of almost losing his mother was a heavy burden. He knew that justice for his mother would not only be the punishment of his daughter-in-law, but the guarantee that she would live the rest of her days in peace, surrounded by love and care. The mansion, once a stage of betrayal, would now be a refuge. He turned to the bed, watching his mother's gentle breathing, the constant sound of the monitor, a promise of life and a reminder of his new mission. Life, though still fragile, pulsed in the matriarch's room. The sheikh did not move away, his eyes fixed on his mother's pale figure. The soft beep 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 of the heart monitor was the only sound that mattered, a melody of hope that slowly began to dissipate the fog of dread that enveloped him. The medical team, a silent army of professionals, moved with precision and discretion, each aware of the importance of the task and the authority of the man who watched them. He had mobilized the best, the most renowned specialists, and would spare no resources to ensure his mother received the most impeccable care. Guilt, a heavy burden, still squeezed his chest. How could he have been so blind, so negligent? The image of his ex-wife's mobile phone charging in place of his mother's respirator burned in his memory like an indelible mark. He had built an empire, but failed to protect what was most precious. That failure, he swore, would never be repeated. His presence there, a tireless sentinel, was his silent vow. He held his mother's hand again, feeling the faint pulse, a tenuous but persistent thread of life. As the mansion transformed into a sanctuary of recovery, the sheikh did not allow his vigilance to wane. He made a series of calls, his voice low and controlled, but each word laden with cold determination. "Omar," he instructed his most loyal advisor, "I want you to initiate a full audit of all properties and accounts she may have had access to. Every penny, every jewel, every asset. I want everything tracked and recovered. And, Omar, ensure she has absolutely no resources. Not a single dirham, not a single contact who can help her. I want her to feel the weight of her own insignificance." Dam, on the other end of the line, Omar, a man of unwavering loyalty and ruthless efficiency, responded with his calm, professional voice. "We are already in process, Sheikh. Her travel documents have been cancelled, and any offshore accounts she may have tried to hide are being frozen. Her reputation is already in tatters, and anyone who dares extend a hand to her will face the consequences." Nassau, a faint smile, cold and joyless, touched the sheikh's lips. Justice was being served, not with the swiftness of a blow, but with the slow, inexorable grinding of a millstone. Far from the mansion's opulence, in a world she thought she had left behind, the ex-wife stumbled through the city's dusty streets. The morning sun, which in the mansion brought the promise of a new day, here was an inferno of heat and dust, revealing the harshness of her new reality. Her luxurious silk dress, now crumpled and soiled, seemed a cruel mockery of her past. Her stomach rumbled with a sharp ache, and her throat was dry and raw, scratching with every attempt to swallow. She spotted a simple diner, the scent of coffee and fresh bread wafting through the air, a torture to her hunger. With a last vestige of dignity, she entered. "A coffee, please," she asked, her voice sounding strange and hoarse. The attendant, a man with a tired face, served her a steaming plastic cup. She reached out, but he stopped her with a gesture. "Payment first, madam." The ex-wife rummaged through the small evening bag she still clutched, a luxury item now grotesquely out of place. Empty. There wasn't a single dirham, not a single penny. Panic struck her again, stronger than before. I don't have any money right now. My husband. He will pay. I am the sheikh's wife." The attendant, who had seen dozens of people in desperate situations, shook his head. "No credit here, madam, and the sheikh, he's not my problem." His words were a blow, more painful than any slap. The woman, once so powerful, felt tears well up, but she pushed them back with furious anger. She wouldn't cry. Not there, not in front of such an insignificant man. She left the diner, her head spinning, the sensation of dizziness almost knocking her down. The sheikh was not just expelling her, he was erasing her from existence. Every door she tried to open closed before she could even touch the handle. Her friends no longer existed, her calls ignored, her names blocked. Her family, aware of the sheikh's relentless fury and the power he wielded, had distanced themselves, fearing being dragged into the abyss with her. She was a ghost, a shadow, a non-person, wandering through a world that no longer recognized her. The previous night had been a nightmare of cold and fear, but the day promised to be even worse. She tried to recall a safe place, someone who might show pity, but her mind was blank, obscured by shock and deprivation. The brutal reality of her new existence struck her with the force of a hammer with every step. The luxury she so valued was now a distant memory, mocking her in her helplessness. The sheikh had promised she would enjoy no comfort, and he was keeping his word with terrifying precision. She was alone, completely and irremediably alone, in a desert of indifference. The city's noise, once a distant background, now seemed a chorus of mocking voices. The ex-wife stumbled through the dusty streets, the relentless sun punishing her unprotected skin. The city's noise, once a distant background, now transformed into an inferno of honking voices and shuffling feet, each sound amplifying her growing agony. The luxurious silk fabric of her dress, once a symbol of power, now clung to her sweaty skin, a cruel reminder of a past that unraveled with every step. Her throat was so dry it ached, and hunger gnawed at her stomach with an intensity she had never experienced. She spotted a small alley, a welcome shadow beneath the overhang of an old building. Her legs trembling, she dragged herself there, collapsing heavily onto a piece of soiled cardboard. The tears she had suppressed in the diner now flowed freely, mixing with the sweat and dust that covered her face. Rage boiled within her, an impotent fury against the sheikh, against the world, against her own stupidity. How could he do this to her? How could he take everything? In her mind, the image of the mansion shimmered, an oasis of comfort and opulence. She could almost feel the coolness of the air conditioning, the soft touch of silk sheets, the scent of fresh flowers in her chambers. The memory of her dressing room, filled with jewels and designer dresses, was a torture. Now she lay there, dirty, hungry, and alone, an outcast in her own kingdom. She tried to calm herself, breathing deeply, but the hot, heavy air only intensified her discomfort. Meanwhile, in the mansion, a reverent silence hung over the matriarch's room. The constant beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor seemed a little stronger, more rhythmic. The medical team, exhausted but vigilant, exchanged glances of relief. Her fever had subsided somewhat, and the old woman's breathing, though still assisted, was more stable. The sheikh, seated beside the bed, held his mother's hand, feeling the faint warmth that was beginning to return to her skin. A doctor approached, his voice low and gentle. "Sheikh, the improvement is remarkable. She is responding well to the medication, and the oxygen is doing its work. It's still early to say, but the worst seems to have passed." The sheikh nodded, a knot in his throat loosening slightly. When can she be moved to a regular room, and what are the prospects for a full recovery? We will keep her in the ICU for a few more hours for intensive observation, but if everything continues like this, we can move her to a private room tomorrow. As for recovery, Sheikh, she is a strong woman. With proper care and physiotherapy, we believe she can regain much of her mobility and independence. However, the trauma was significant. She will need constant attention. "Ah, constant attention," echoed in the sheikh's mind. He had failed in that before, and he would not fail again. He called Omar, who was in an adjacent room, coordinating the next steps. "Omar," the sheikh said, his voice firm, "I want you to hire the best private nurses, geriatric specialists, for a 24-hour rotation. I want her room redecorated to be as comfortable and accessible as possible. And I want the mansion's security reinforced. No one, absolutely no one, will have access to her without my explicit permission." "It will be done, Sheikh," Omar replied, the efficiency in his voice palpable. "I am already arranging everything. The new security protocols will be in place within hours." The sheikh hung up, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The mansion would be a sanctuary for his mother. He looked at her wrinkled face, a small wrinkle of concern still visible between her eyebrows. He caressed her thin hair. "You are safe now, mother. I promise." Far from there, in the cramped alley, the ex-wife was at her limit. The sun continued to punish, and the thirst was unbearable. She tried to stand, but her legs gave way. Despair consumed her, and a new wave of panic washed over her. She couldn't stay there. She needed water, food, a place to sleep. With a monumental effort, she dragged herself out of the alley, her eyes sweeping the street for any sign of hope. She saw a small market, its colorful stalls filled with fruits and vegetables. The scent of spices and fresh bread was a torture. She approached a fruit stall, her eyes fixed on a bunch of succulent dates. "Please," she murmured to the vendor, a robust man in a turban, "I need water and perhaps some dates. I'll pay later. My husband is an important man." The vendor looked at her, then at her dirty, crumpled dress, and shook his head slowly. "I don't know your husband, madam, and there's no credit here. Go away. You're scaring my customers." The humiliation was a physical blow. She felt the gaze of other shoppers on her, a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Blood rushed to her cheeks, and she turned abruptly, tears stinging her eyes again. She was hungry, thirsty, exhausted, and now publicly shamed. The sheik's promise that she would enjoy no comfort was becoming a brutal and incessant reality. Every closed door, every look of contempt, was a nail in the coffin of her old life. She walked away from the market, the noise and smells now unbearable. The midday sun burned, and her dizziness increased. She needed to find a place to hide, to compose herself, but there was nowhere to go. The city was a labyrinth of indifferent streets, and she was a stranger in her own desert. Solitude swallowed her, an icy void that pierced her soul. She was lost, aimless, nameless, futureless, only the cruel present and the relentless shadow of her own ruin. The ex-wife, now a pathetic and disheveled figure, wandered aimlessly through the streets she once glided over in luxury cars. The sun, which seemed to pursue her, burned her unprotected skin, and the hot asphalt radiated a suffocating heat. Her feet, once accustomed to Persian carpets and cool marble, ached inside her high-heeled shoes, now dusty and scuffed. Thirst was a constant agony, her mouth as dry as sand. She spotted a public fountain, where children played and men washed their faces. The temptation was immense, the sight of the clear water almost making her stagger, but shame paralyzed her. How could she, the sheik's wife, the ex-wife of the sheik, stoop to drinking from a public fountain like a beggar? Pride, however, was draining away as quickly as her strength. Hunger, a relentless beast, gnawed at her insides. She passed a bakery, the smell of fresh bread and Arabic sweets invading her nostrils, making her stomach rumble in protest. Her eyes, once haughty, now fixed on the food scraps that fell to the ground or were discarded in bins. A wave of nausea hit her, not from the dirt, but from the sheer abjection of the idea. Was this what she had become? An outcast, scavenging through trash? The city's incessant noise, the clamor of horns, the murmur of voices, and the shuffling of feet, all blended into a deafening chorus that amplified her growing agony. She stumbled, almost falling, and leaned against a rough wall. The world spun. Lights flickered in her peripheral vision, and dizziness threatened to fell her. She needed a place to rest, away from curious and contemptuous gazes. Her eyes swept the urban landscape, searching for refuge. A darker alley, between two tall buildings, seemed to offer a promise of anonymity and shade. With a final effort, she dragged herself into the alley, the air there denser and the smell of garbage stronger, a pungent stench that clung to her clothes. She huddled against the cold, dirty wall, her body trembling from exhaustion and dehydration. The tears she had sworn not to shed now flowed freely, hot and salty, washing away the dirt and smudged makeup from her face. The sheik had succeeded. He had broken her. The fury that had driven her was transforming into pure, overwhelming despair. She closed her eyes, wishing it were a horrible nightmare from which she could wake. but the pain in her feet, the dryness in her throat, and the smell of filth were too real. Irrefutable proof of her new and terrible reality. Meanwhile, in the mansion, the matriarch's life continued to stabilize. The sheikh had not left her bedside, except for brief moments of forced rest. The constant presence of doctors and nurses, the soft sound of the monitors, and the purified air of the room transformed the environment of anguish into a sanctuary of hope. The following morning, as promised by the doctor, the sheikh's mother was transferred to a specially prepared private room. The walls had been painted in soft aqua tones, conveying calm. A new orthopedic mattress and Egyptian cotton sheets ensured maximum comfort. The wide windows offered a serene view of the mansion's lush gardens, now a spectacle of vibrant flowers and verdant foliage. State-of-the-art medical equipment, discreetly integrated, ensured every need was met. 2 nurses with decades of experience in geriatrics were on constant standby, their movements silent and efficient. They monitored the matriarch's vital signs, administered medication, and assisted her with gentle physiotherapy, all under the sheikh's watchful supervision. He observed every detail, every gesture, ensuring his mother received the best possible care. "She is sleeping peacefully, Sheikh," one of the nurses whispered, adjusting the blanket over the matriarch. "Her fever has not returned, and her breathing is strong and regular." A tired but genuine smile appeared on the sheikh's face. He approached the bed and gently held his mother's hand. Her skin was warmer, and a faint flush had returned to her cheeks. He felt a pang of guilt for his previous oversight, a sharp pain he promised himself never to feel again. That moment of his mother's vulnerability on the brink of death had been a brutal catalyst for his own conscience. He had been blind, too focused on his empire, and had allowed wickedness to prosper in his own home. He turned to Omar, who was standing discreetly at the door. "Omar, I want you to reinforce the mansion's external security. No unauthorized vehicle should even approach the gates, and all correspondence must be filtered and checked before reaching any of us." "Consider it done, Sheikh," Omar replied. "The new guards are already in position, and a mail screening system was implemented this morning. There are no loopholes." The Sheikh nodded, satisfied. His mother was safe. He had restored her dignity, and now he would protect her with the same ferocity with which he had built his empire. The tranquility in the room contrasted drastically with the storm he knew was still raging outside, a direct result of his actions, but he had no regrets. Justice, for him, was a force of nature, and his ex-wife was now at its mercy. The former Sheikha, now merely a shadow of her former self, opened her eyes in the damp alley. The smell of garbage and sewage was suffocating, and the morning sun, already scorching the streets, barely reached that gloomy refuge. Her body ached in every muscle, every joint, as if she had been beaten. Her mouth was dry, her throat raw, and hunger gnawed at her insides with an intensity she had never imagined possible. The cold night air had left her limbs numb, and the hard, dirty ground had dug into her skin. She tried to stand, but her legs trembled and gave way, throwing her back against the rough wall. A faint moan escaped her cracked lips, the image of the public fountain from the previous day, of the clear water flowing, returned to haunt her. The pride that had prevented her from drinking had vanished, replaced by a primal despair. She needed water. She needed food. With a Herculean effort, using her dusty hands for support, she dragged herself out of the alley. The sunlight hit her like a physical blow, blinding her for an instant. The streets were already bustling with life. The city's hum, a distant buzz in her ears. Her eyes swept the crowd, searching for something, anything. A dropped coin, a forgotten piece of bread. She spotted an older woman with a colorful headscarf, sitting on a stone bench, eating dates. The sweet, sticky scent wafted towards her. The former Sheikha felt an uncontrollable urgency. She approached, her dirty clothes and tangled hair causing people to recoil from her. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse and almost inaudible, Could you give me a date? I'm starving." The woman looked at her with a mixture of revulsion and pity, her eyes fixed on the former Sheikha's outstretched hands, dirty and with broken nails. She shook her head. "I have nothing for you, madam. Go away." The refusal was a slap in the face. The humiliation, which she thought had already reached its peak, found a new depth. She walked away, her eyes burning with unshed tears. Hunger and thirst were now a constant pain, an endless torture. She continued to wander, the sun climbing higher and higher in the sky, punishing her. She passed an overflowing dumpster, the nauseating stench invading her nostrils. For an instant she hesitated, her stomach churning with disgust, but hunger was stronger. She bent down, her hands trembling, and began to rummage through the scraps. A piece of dry bread, a fruit peel. Her dignity, once an unshakable pillar, crumbled with each touch of the filth. A sharp cry from a nearby vendor made her recoil. "Get out of there! You tramp, don't dirty my shop!" She flinched, her heart pounding in her chest. The vendor's look of contempt and the laughter of some passers-by made her flee, running aimlessly, tears finally streaming down her dirty face. She felt like a cornered animal, with nowhere to go, no refuge. The sheik had promised she would have no comfort, and he was fulfilling his promise with a cruelty that rivaled her own. Meanwhile, in the mansion, life pulsed with a restored calm. In the matriarch's room, the soft tones of the walls and the fresh scent of cut flowers created an atmosphere of serenity. The sheikh was sitting by the bed, reading aloud from a book of Arabic poetry, his voice soft and comforting. The nurses had left for a brief break, leaving him alone with his mother. Suddenly, her hand moved slightly. The sheikh stopped reading, his heart tight with anticipation. He looked at his mother's wrinkled face. Her eyes opened slowly, meeting his. A flicker of recognition appeared in her pupils, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "My son," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. A wave of emotion hit him, overwhelming and powerful. He squeezed her hand gently. "I am here, mother. I am here." The words were simple, yet laden with all the regret and love he felt. He felt a lump in his throat, but forced himself to keep his voice steady. "You are safe now. Everything will be all right." She closed her eyes again, the smile still present. The peace on her face was a balm to the sheikh's soul. He knew the path to recovery would be long, but her presence, her voice, was the greatest gift he could receive. Omar entered the room discreetly, his professional gaze softened at the sight of the scene. The sheikh gestured for him to wait. After a few minutes, the matriarch seemed to have fallen back asleep. The sheikh stood up, walking to the door with Omar. "How are the preparations for physiotherapy, Omar?" the sheikh asked in a low voice. "The best specialists have been contacted, sheikh. They will come tomorrow for an initial assessment and to draw up a recovery plan. I have also arranged for an intercom system to be installed in her room, connected directly to your chambers and the nurses, so she can call at any time." The sheikh nodded, satisfied. "Excellent. I want her to lack nothing. And about external news. Is there anything I should know?" Omar hesitated for a moment. "Sheikh, the situation of your ex-wife has been commented on in the streets. She has been seen scavenging through trash and begging for alms. The news spread quickly." The sheikh heard the words, but felt none of the pang of remorse Omar might have expected. His face remained impassive. "So be it, Omar. She made her bed. Now she must lie in it." His voice was cold, devoid of any emotion. "My only concern is my mother's well-being. Ensure that nothing, not even the echo of such gossip, disturbs her peace." "It will be done, Sheikh," Omar replied, understanding the depth of his leader's determination. The sheikh returned to his mother's bedside, watching her sleep. The mansion was a refuge of calm and care, a stark contrast to the chaos and misery he had imposed upon his ex-wife. The mansion, once a stage of oppressive silence and veiled intrigues, now shone with a profound calm, a sanctuary of healing and care. The morning after her first conscious conversation with her son, the Sheikh's matriarch awoke with a new, albeit fragile, strength. The scent of fresh herbs and the soft murmur of the nurses filled the room, creating an atmosphere of renewal. The Sheikh was there, as always, sitting by the bed. He watched attentively as the carefully selected physiotherapists began the first session of gentle exercises. Every movement, however small, was a miracle. His mother's fingers curled slightly. The muscles in her arms responded with a faint tremor. A sigh of relief escaped the Sheikh's lips. He felt a wave of gratitude and overwhelming love. Life was returning, and he was there to witness every step. "You're doing very well, Mother," he whispered, his voice laden with emotion. She opened her eyes and, with visible effort, offered a faint smile. "I'm trying," she replied, her voice still hoarse, but with a thread of determination. That sound, the melody of her voice, was the sweetest music the Sheikh had ever heard. He promised himself he would do everything to ensure she enjoyed life to its fullest again. As the matriarch dedicated herself to her slow recovery, the Sheikh, with a lighter but still vigilant mind, began to resume some of his responsibilities. Omar informed him of external developments about the repercussions of the former Sheikh's expulsion. The news spread like wildfire in the desert, fueled by the city's whispers and the shocking sight of the mansion's former lady in a state of misery. Omar reported that the former Sheikha had been seen wandering through street markets, her once impeccable figure now unrecognizable under layers of dirt and despair. She tried to sell some jewels that somehow she managed to keep with her Sheikh, Omar informed, his voice neutral. But they were refused. No one wanted to associate with her, given her current reputation. The Sheikh merely nodded, his face a mask of serene indifference. "Let her learn the value of what she scorned, Omar. I have no further interest in her fate." His priority was clear, crystal clear as the water of a newly discovered spring. Far from the mansion's opulence and security, the former Sheikha, now merely a shadow of her former self, felt the weight of each passing day. The scorching sun punished her skin, and the night's cold penetrated her bones. Hunger was a constant companion, a hollow growl in her stomach that drove her to increasingly desperate acts. She had tried to sell the last rings she still had hidden in her clothes, but the merchant's distrust and the knowledge of her downfall prevented her. A goldsmith, with a look of contempt, chased her out of his shop with a shout. The humiliation was a heavier burden than hunger itself. She hid in a narrow alley, the smell of garbage invading her nostrils. The distant sound of laughter and conversations from the main street seemed to mock her misery. Her eyes, once full of arrogance, now carried a deep sadness and a constant fear. In an act of desperation, she spotted a fruit cart abandoned for an instant, the vendor distracted with a customer. Her heart pounding in her chest, she approached furtively, her hands reaching for a bunch of dates. But before she could take them, a strong hand grabbed her arm. "Thief!" the vendor shouted, his voice booming. "You think you can steal my goods, you tramp?" He pushed her hard, throwing her onto the dusty ground. The dates fell from her trembling hand, rolling across the floor. The former Sheikha felt a sharp pain in her knee and shame burning on her face. People stopped, watching her with curiosity and disdain. Tears of rage and helplessness welled in her eyes. She rose, staggering and limping, and fled again, the sound of passers-by's laughter echoing in her ears. There was no refuge, no compassion. The city, once her stage of power, was now her relentless executioner. She felt trapped in a nightmare from which she couldn't wake, each day a new layer of suffering. Back at the mansion, the Sheikh received Omar again. "Sheikh," The security team has identified an increase in attempts to access the property by journalists and curious individuals. They have been duly turned away. Excellent, the sheikh replied, without looking up from the poetry book he was reading to his mother, who slept peacefully. Continue to ensure her privacy above all else, and Omar, he added, his voice grave, prepare my jet. I need to make a quick trip to Riyadh tomorrow. There are business matters that can no longer wait. Omar nodded. It will be done, Sheikh. Your mother will be under the care of the medical team and nurses. Security will be reinforced in your absence. The sheikh closed the book, his expression thoughtful. He had restored his mother's dignity, ensured her safety, and begun her path to recovery. Now, it was time to reassert his control over his empire, an empire he had neglected for too long. The storm in his personal life had passed, but the cold breeze of global responsibility began to blow again. He leaned in and kissed his mother's forehead, a gesture of love and promise. His world was in order, and he was ready to face whatever came next. The following morning brought with it the buzz of a new journey for the sheikh. The sun was still stretching on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, when he leaned over his mother's bed. His eyes rested on her serene face, a gentle smile on her lips. Her soft breathing was a balm to his soul. He kissed her forehead again, a silent farewell and a promise of return. Omar, ensure that the nurses maintain the physiotherapy regimen and that Dr. Fatima makes her daily visit without fail. Any change, however minor, I want to be informed immediately, the sheikh instructed, his voice firm as he walked towards the mansion's exit. The sound of his footsteps echoed on the polished marble. Omar nodded, his posture impeccable. Everything is organized, Sheikh. Security around the property has been reinforced, and the privacy of the lady matriarch is our primary concern. The Sheikh paused briefly, his gaze sweeping the opulent entrance hall. And about the external situation? No significant change, Sheikh, Omar replied, understanding the unspoken question. The city continues to murmur. But measures to contain the spread of gossip have been effective. The former Sheikha has not been seen in the central markets, but sporadic reports place her in more remote areas, seeking shelter and food. A slight nod was the Sheikh's only response. His mind was already in Riyadh, on the challenges that awaited him. He entered the armored car, the engine softly roaring, and departed towards the private airport, leaving behind the mansion that was now a sanctuary of peace and healing. As the sheikh flew over the vast desert sands, the mansion continued its rhythm of recovery. In the matriarch's room, the days unfolded with a restorative calm. The nurses and physiotherapists worked with dedication, and every small advance was celebrated. One day, as a nurse helped her sit on the edge of the bed, the matriarch reached out and touched a small flower in a vase. Her wrinkled fingers brushed the soft petals, and a sigh of pleasure escaped her lips. That simple gesture, the ability to interact with the world around her, was a powerful sign of life returning. The newly installed intercom system remained silent, a testament that her needs were being promptly met. Far from there, under the city's merciless sun, the former Sheikha stumbled through the dusty streets. Hunger and dehydration had sculpted her face, transforming her once haughty beauty into a mask of suffering. Her clothes, once luxurious, were now dirty, torn rags hanging from her thin body. She had tried to approach some more modest houses, begging for a sip of water or a piece of bread, but the fear and contempt in their eyes were an insurmountable barrier. Children pointed at her, adults turned their faces away. Night fell, bringing with it a biting cold that penetrated her bones. She huddled in a dark alley, the smell of garbage even stronger in the darkness. Her stomach rumbled, a loud and painful sound. Desperation drove her to an act that, in her former life, would have been unthinkable. She spotted a small street restaurant with some food scraps still on the tables. Her heart pounding in her chest, she waited for the right moment. When the owner was distracted, she ran, grabbed a piece of stale bread and a bone with a little meat, and fled as fast as her tired legs would allow. A cry of "Thief!" ripped through the night air, but she didn't look back. She hid in an improvised hiding place, trembling, and devoured the food with an animalistic voracity, tears streaming down her face as the taste of the hard bread and cold meat was the sweetest she had felt in days. The humiliation was constant, but hunger was a crueler master. Meanwhile, in Riyadh, the Sheikh conducted important meetings, his mind sharp and focused on the business of his vast empire. He negotiated deals, analyzed reports, and made decisions that would affect thousands of lives. The personal storm had cost him time and attention, but now, with his mother recovering and his house in order, he was determined to regain lost ground. The cold breeze of global responsibility had transformed into a gale, and he was ready to navigate it. Despite the distance, his mind occasionally returned to the mansion, to the image of his mother, a constant reminder of what he had almost lost and what he now protected tooth and nail. He knew that the empire was not just about wealth, but about the security and honor of his family, and he would not allow anything else to threaten them. His trip was coming to an end, and he yearned to return to his sanctuary, to the side of the woman who was the rock of his existence. The roar of the jet engines softened as the aircraft began its descent, tearing through the desert air. Below, the city lights spread out, twinkling like diamonds on a dark velvet cloak. The sheikh watched from the window, his expression a mixture of satisfaction from the successful negotiations and a deep yearning for home. His mind had been a whirlwind of numbers and agreements in Riyadh, but a quiet corner of his thoughts always held the image of his mother, serene and recovering. He yearned to see her, to witness firsthand the progress Omar had reported with such meticulousness. Upon landing, the journey from the private airfield to the mansion seemed both swift and agonizingly slow. The familiar gates rose, grand and imposing, a symbol of the sanctuary they guarded. As the armored car glided up the driveway, the sheikh felt a wave of relief wash over him. The air inside the mansion was different now, lighter, imbued with a sense of peace that had been absent for too long. He was greeted by Omar in the grand hall, whose face bore a rare and gentle smile. "Welcome back, Sheikh. Your mother is waiting for you." The sheikh walked with purpose towards his mother's suite, his heart vibrating with anticipation. The door was ajar, and a soft lute melody drifted from within. He pushed it gently. His mother was sitting in a specially designed armchair by the window, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Her hair, once disheveled, was carefully combed, and a delicate shawl covered her shoulders. A nurse sat nearby, observing in silence, while a physiotherapist demonstrated gentle hand exercises. But it wasn't just her physical appearance that had transformed. As the sheikh entered, her eyes, once clouded by suffering, brightened. A faint smile touched her lips, and she extended a hand towards him, her fingers moving with newfound strength. "My son," she whispered, her voice still weak, but clear enough for him to hear. He knelt beside her, taking her hand in his, a warmth spreading through him. "Mother," he replied, his own voice thick with emotion. He kissed her forehead, feeling the soft skin, a world away from the cold, fragile touch he remembered. The intercom, a silent sentinel on the bedside table, affirmed the impeccable care she received. He watched her breathe slowly and deeply, a testament to the life returning to her lungs. The sight filled him with immense gratitude, a profound sense of having pulled her back from the precipice. Meanwhile, miles away, the former Sheikha, whose name was now rarely uttered, found herself at the absolute nadir of her existence. The meager sustenance she had stolen offered only temporary relief, and the pangs of hunger returned with brutal force. Her body, once adorned in silks and jewels, was now a canvas of bruises and dirt. Her once smooth skin was cracked by the sun and wind, her lips parched and bleeding. She had spent the day wandering the city's outskirts, avoiding the central markets where her face was recognized and scorned. The fear of being caught, of the jeers and shoves, was a constant companion. She stumbled upon a small, dusty nomad camp on the fringes of the desert, a few tattered tents huddled together. Desperate, she approached, her voice a hoarse, raspy whisper as she begged for water. An old woman, her face etched by 1,000 suns, looked at her with eyes that held no pity, only a chilling recognition. "You are the Sheikh's woman," she stated, her voice hoarse, "the one who left his mother to die." The former Sheikha flinched, the words a new lash on her already raw soul. She tried to deny, to plead, but the old woman merely raised a hand, her gaze unwavering. "The desert does not forget, the earth does not forgive. Go away, there is no water for those with dry hearts." Humiliated, she turned, the gazes of the nomad children burning into her back. The sun punished mercilessly, and the vast, empty expanse of the desert seemed to mock her. There was no solace, no refuge. The weight of her past actions had become an invisible, suffocating cloak. She collapsed behind a small cluster of thorny bushes, her body trembling, her throat burning. She closed her eyes, wishing for the end of the torment, but even oblivion seemed to elude her. The desert's silence was broken only by the frantic beating of her own heart and the distant mocking whisper of the wind. Back at the mansion, the sheikh spent hours by his mother's side, reading to her, sharing stories of his trip, and simply holding her hand. He watched her fall asleep peacefully, her breathing even and steady. The outside world, with its relentless business and cruel justice, faded into the background. There, in that room, was the true heart of his empire, a heart he would protect with every fiber of his being. He knew his mother's recovery would be a long journey, but it was a journey they would take together, step by step, painful and hopeful. The peace that enveloped the mansion was a stark contrast to the desolate wasteland where his ex-wife now lay, a living testament to the merciless nature of fate. The peace that enveloped the mansion deepened with each passing day. The sheikh, now fully immersed in the rhythm of his mother's recovery, found a profound sense of purpose. He watched her strength return slowly, like a delicate flower blossoming after a long winter. The whispers of her voice grew firmer, and the gentle exercises with the physiotherapist began to yield visible results. She could sit up for longer periods, and one day, with the support of 2 nurses, she took a few hesitant steps across the room, a faint but genuine smile lighting up her face. That smile was, for the sheikh, the most precious of all treasures. He spent his mornings in his mother's suite, reading to her excerpts of ancient poetry and tales of his people. Afternoons were dedicated to business, but his focus was different now, more rooted, more aware of life's fragility and the importance of family ties. Omar, the loyal majordomo, kept him updated on the affairs of the house and the empire, but also on the matriarch's progress with a gleam of satisfaction in his eyes. The intercom system, though rarely used, was a constant reminder of the vigilance and care that now permeated every corner of the mansion. Meanwhile, miles away, under the relentless desert sun, the former Sheikha lay in her improvised hiding place. The silence was overwhelming, broken only by the buzzing of insects and the frantic beating of her own heart. The nomad's rejection had been the final blow to her already shattered dignity. Thirst burned her throat, and the hot sand seemed to drain the last drop of energy from her body. She tried to stand, her muscles protesting with pain, but her legs gave way. The world spun, and darkness swallowed her. When consciousness returned, it was with a throbbing headache and the sensation of being dragged. Her eyes opened to the dazzling sunlight, and she saw a rough, tanned face above her. It was one of the desert rangers, men who traversed the vast expanses to maintain order and assist lost travelers. Hope surged in her chest, but it was quickly crushed. "We found you," the man's voice was harsh, devoid of any compassion. "The woman who was expelled from the Sheikh's mansion. The news spreads like wind in the desert." She tried to speak, to beg for water, but her voice was a mere hoarse whisper. The ranger, without another word, tied her to a camel and led her away. There was no rescue, only the continuation of her disgrace. The journey was excruciating, each step of the camel a torment to her bruised body. She was taken to a small village on the desert's borders, a place of simple mud houses and dusty streets. Upon arrival, she was dragged to the central square. The gazes of the people were like knives, cutting into her soul. There was no pity, only contempt and curiosity. An older woman, with eyes that seemed to have seen 1,000 summers, approached her. "She will not die in the desert," the old woman said, her voice laden with a silent authority. "But she will pay for her sins. The sheikh is a just man, and the desert's justice is slow, but relentless." The former sheikha was led to a small courtyard, where she was given a bowl of water and a piece of dry bread. Then she was informed of her new reality. She would work there, in the village, performing the most arduous and humble tasks, carrying water from the well, cleaning the streets, caring for animals. No coin would be paid, just enough to survive, so that her suffering could be a constant reminder of her transgressions. The beauty that once defined her would vanish under the sun and effort. The luxury of her past life was now a distant ghost, replaced by the harsh reality of servitude. Back at the mansion, the sheikh watched his mother fall asleep after a day of progress. A gentle smile rested on her wrinkled lips. Peace filled the room, a balm for the wounds of the past. He knew the journey was long, but every small step was a victory. The outside world, with its brutality and relentless lessons, seemed distant, almost unreal. There, in that sanctuary of healing and love, the sheikh found the true essence of his empire, a legacy he would protect with the same devotion with which he protected his mother. The former sheikha, in turn, was now chained to an existence of hard labor and humiliation, a prisoner of the fate she herself had forged. The sheikh watched his mother walk through the suite, supported by a light cane and the firm hands of a nurse. Her steps were slow, but each one was a melody of triumph. The smile she gave him was now more frequent, her eyes shining with a vivacity he thought he had lost forever. Their conversations were long and full of memories, a balm for the open wounds of the past. The aroma of fresh mint tea hung in the air, and the gentle clinking of porcelain cups was a sound of comfort and normalcy. He spent his mornings with her, reading, listening to her stories, or simply enjoying each other's presence. Recovery was a slow but steady process, and every small victory was celebrated. The physiotherapist praised her dedication, and the matriarch's renewed strength. The sheikh felt that the palace had become a true home again, a sanctuary of peace and healing. His mind, once consumed by business and distance, was now more centered, more aware of what truly mattered. He spent his afternoons in his office, but the thought of his mother accompanied him, shaping his decisions and reminding him of the importance of compassion and vigilance. Omar, always discreet and efficient, ensured every need was met, and the sheikh noticed the silent satisfaction in the majordomo's eyes. Meanwhile, miles away, the former sheikha lived a reality that was the antithesis of all the luxury and comfort she had once known. Her days began before sunrise, with the biting cold of dawn and the harsh call to work. Her daily task was to carry water from the well to the village houses, the bucket heavy and rusty cut into her already rough skin, and the creak of the well rope echoed in her ears with each pull. Her muscles, once soft and untouched, now burned with effort, and her hands were calloused and cracked. The beauty that had defined her had vanished under the merciless sun and constant dust. Her hair, once silky and fragrant, was tangled and dull, her face marked by exhaustion and despair. The simple cotton clothes she wore were stained and worn, a brutal contrast to the silks and jewels that filled her memories. As she passed through the dusty streets, the villagers' gazes followed her. There was no explicit hatred, only a cold indifference and a silent recognition of her punishment. Small children pointed, but were quickly reprimanded by their parents, who preferred silence as a form of condemnation. She heard the rustle of women's skirts as they moved away, avoiding any contact, and the hushed whispers of their conversations that abruptly ceased when she approached. Food was scarce and tasteless, just enough to keep her alive and able to work. At night, she collapsed in a dusty corner of a small courtyard, her body trembling with exhaustion, her mind a whirlwind of regret and bitterness. She dreamed of the mansion, of the soft touch of silk sheets, of lavish banquets, and awoke to the smell of dry earth and the distant howl of a jackal. One day, as she dragged a heavy cart of manure through the village streets, she overheard a group of women talking in the market. "They say the Sheikh's mother is almost fully recovered," one of them said, her voice filled with admiration. "He has dedicated all his time to her. The mansion is full of life again." The cart stopped abruptly, and the former Sheikha felt a sharp pang in her chest, more painful than any physical wound. The news, like a glowing ember, burned in her soul, reminding her of what she had lost and what she had caused. The desert's justice was indeed slow, but its relentlessness was a burden she would carry with every breath, every tired step. In the mansion, the matriarch's recovery had reached a new level, one that filled the Sheikh's heart with deep and quiet joy. She not only walked through the suite, but now descended the grand staircases, supported by a nurse, to spend afternoons in the main hall, enjoying the fresh breeze that entered through the arched windows. Her steps, though still cautious, were firm, and the cane was more a symbol of support than of weakness. His mother's voice had regained its strength, and the Sheikh delighted in the stories of her youth, told with a renewed sparkle in her eyes. The scent of soft incense and the sound of a lute, played by a discreet musician, filled the air, creating an atmosphere of serenity and well-being. The Sheikh spent every free moment by her side, reading, talking, or simply watching her, as she embroidered intricate patterns on fine fabrics, an activity she had abandoned for years. The physiotherapist, a woman with a gentle smile and firm hands, expressed her admiration for the old woman's resilience. "She is a force of nature, Sheikh," she said one day, as the matriarch laughed softly, a sound that once seemed impossible to hear. The mansion, once a silent and opulent palace, now pulsed with renewed life, a testament to the power of healing and unconditional love. The servants, once tense and apprehensive, moved with a lightness and efficiency that reflected the peace permeating the home. Omar, the major domo, observed everything with a satisfied gleam in his eyes, his serious demeanor softened by an almost imperceptible smile. Meanwhile, miles away, the former Sheikha continued her penance in the heart of the desert. Her days were a succession of exhausting and humiliating labors. The task of carrying water from the well had become routine, but each day it seemed harder. Her shoulders ached constantly, and the blisters on her hands had turned into rough, painful calluses. Her hair, tangled and full of dust, looked like a bird's nest, and her face, once impeccable, was now marked by deep wrinkles and the merciless sun, her skin rough and burnt. The beauty that had defined her had completely vanished, replaced by a skeletal and stooped figure whose simple, dirty clothes hung from her thin body. The villagers, once indifferent, now looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt. Children, less restrained than adults, sometimes threw small stones at her, laughing as she staggered under the weight of the bucket. There was no one to defend her, no one to offer solace. She was the personification of disgrace, a living reminder of the consequences of cruelty. One morning, as she cleaned the village stable, the strong smell of manure and sweat filling her nostrils, she overheard a group of merchants who had just arrived in the village. They spoke loudly, their voices laden with news from the capital. "The sheikh is radiant, they say," one of them commented, his voice echoing through the mud walls. "His mother is strong again, walking in the gardens, enjoying life, a true blessing." A bucket of water she was holding slipped from her hands, hitting the dirt floor with a dull thud, splashing mud onto her legs and clothes. The news, once again, struck her like lightning. The image of the matriarch, once frail and dependent, now walking in the gardens, was such a brutal contrast to her own reality that it made her tremble. A wave of nausea invaded her, mixed with a bitterness that burned her throat. Life in the mansion, with its luxury and peace, seemed a distant dream, a paradise lost by her own wickedness. In the desert, justice was indeed relentless, and every day of her existence was a biting reminder of the price of her sins. Mud streamed down the former Sheikha's legs, mixing with sweat and dust, but she didn't notice. The nausea that had invaded her with the news of the matriarch's recovery had transformed into a constant burning in her stomach, a physical reminder of her ruin. Her days of carrying water were over. Her muscles, once aching, were now atrophied, unable to bear the weight. Her new task was even more degrading, cleaning the village's open sewers, a job no one else wanted. The fetid smell clung to her clothes, to her skin, to her tangled hair, making her an outcast even among outcasts. Her fingers, once adorned with jewels, were now deformed and infected, her nails broken and dirty. The merciless sun had carved deep wrinkles into her face, and her eyes, once full of malice, were empty, clouded by a haze of exhaustion and despair. Children no longer deigned to throw stones, they simply avoided her, covering their noses as they passed. Adults averted their gaze, as if the mere sight of her were an omen of bad luck. She was the personification of disgrace, a walking skeleton of regret. At night, she huddled in a dark, foul-smelling corner, her body trembling not only from cold, but from a hunger that gnawed at her insides. Dreams of luxury had vanished, replaced by vivid visions of her mother-in-law's face. Not the frail, dying face she had left, but a face full of life, smiling at the sheik. Irony was a slow poison, corroding what remained of her soul. She had tried to destroy a life, and in return, her own life had been destroyed in a much crueler and more complete way. Far from there, in the opulent mansion, the matriarch's life had fully blossomed. She not only walked, but danced softly to the sound of the flute and lute, her steps light and full of grace. Her laughter filled the halls, a melodic echo that dispelled any shadow of the past. Her hair, now white as snow, framed a serene and wise face, and her eyes, bright with renewed vivacity, radiated unconditional love. She had become the pulsating heart of the mansion, the source of wisdom and joy. The sheik watched his mother in the garden, teaching her granddaughters to embroider, their voices mingling with the chirping of birds. A gentle smile rested on his lips, and his eyes, once marked by pain and worry, now shone with a deep peace. He had found his purpose, not just as a powerful ruler, but as a devoted son and a guardian of the family. The mansion, once a stage of intrigues and suffering, had transformed into a sanctuary of love and harmony. Omar, the major domo, with a discreet smile, served fresh mint tea, and the clinking of porcelain cups was the soundtrack to a life fully restored. The sheik knew that the desert's justice had been served. There was no more fury in his heart, only a profound understanding that every action has its consequence. He had protected what was most precious and in return had received the greatest of blessings, his mother's life and happiness. He joined them in the garden, the warm sun kissing his skin, feeling the pulse of a renewed life. The former Sheikha had transformed into a dark legend, a tale whispered to disobedient children. But there, under the blue sky and the warmth of the sun, life continued, full of promises and a peace that seemed eternal. The melody of the flute rose into the air, a hymn to resilience and love.